Amazon Prime recently re-added all the Bond films back onto the streaming service. And with them, new key art images that remove any guns from the hands of the respective actors.
Good God.
I think by now we Bond fans are not unused to enhanced imagery from the films being utilised for various re-release purposes. There's that infamous bunch of DVD and Blu-ray covers that came out a few years back, which left much to be desired and featured some horrific airbrushing cases. This Live and Let Die cover in particular lives rent-free in my brain, and it will now be joined by this new A View to a Kill key art, where they have elongated the actors' arms to an hilarious degree with AI, presumably, to expand on what was in the original production still. Seriously, is this James Bond, or is this Roger Moore as Ian Fleming's Slender Man? Aside from some dodgy design decisions, the common thread amongst this new material is that where applicable, guns have been removed from the actors' persons, to the extent that it has somewhat changed the impression of these images. Look at this new Dr. No art, for example. Removing the gun from Connery's hands removes any sense of danger that the original image had, an image which has been used for promotional purposes many times before, including on DVD artwork. Without the gun, frankly, Connery just looks a bit sassy here with his arms folded and his shoulders slumped like that. Obviously, the original image was composed with the presence of a gun in mind, which would influence the posing, the composition of the image, and what have you. And if you're going to take that element away, it completely changes the context to the point that you wonder why they didn't just use a still where the actor isn't holding a gun in the first place. And heck, if you're tinkering with the images to this degree, why not just AI up a whole new image of Connery from scratch if you really want to? Actually, pretend I never said that. I don't want to go giving anyone any ideas. Good evening, Mr. Bond fans. The subject of gun imagery being minimized in James Bond-related material is something that has cropped up in a couple of videos that I've made over the last few years, mainly in relation to product tie-ins and the video games and what have you, but this latest instance with this Amazon key art has sort of led me to think, like, okay, maybe I need to make a whole video dedicated to this subject so that we can collectively discuss what the hell is going on here.
I hate guns.
Guns are a part of James Bond. They have been forever. He is a British secret agent with a license to kill, and a smothering pillow would have been a bit of a tricky weapon for him to conceal in a holster. So yes, he is often carrying a gun with him, usually a Walther, and he will fire that gun over the course of his missions, usually several times.
Every now and then a trigger has to be pulled.
Look at every main Bond movie poster since the series began. Posters by a variety of different artists appealing to different generations of moviegoers over the decades. What's the one common element of these posters aside from Bond himself?
A gun. Not exactly Christmas, is it?
And okay, sure, you know what, I do get why in an instance like the new Live and Let Die artwork that cropping the gun out of the image of Roger makes some sense given it's placed very low down in the original shot, and, you know, it makes more sense than swapping his face out for some reason, and if these images were merely cropping out guns for the sake of a better composition, I don't think this would be a subject we'd be discussing today. But to go to the lengths of actually photoshopping or AIing guns out of the hands of the actors, I mean, something's obviously up with this, right? As I say, this is not a new subject to the world of Bond, and a pulling back of gun imagery and usage is something that I've talked about in relation to the games previously. 007 Cypher was the Apple Arcade game that had Bond putting bad guys to sleep with some kind of sci-fi pistol as opposed to a traditional gun, and okay, I get that they probably wanted a younger audience to play the game, so age rating wise, yeah, fine, just give him some kind of sci-fi implement. Eon Productions, who owned Bond at that time, were skittish about guns in the games. This has been documented previously. I don't want to totally cover that same subject matter again, but okay, they don't want kids killing people with guns as James Bond. I can understand the reasoning there. And I do also understand a similar kind of reasoning when it comes to removing the gun silhouette from the 007 logo on packaging of certain products. Like, okay, fine, I guess kids might buy those spy glasses and the absence of a gun silhouette on the packaging is not necessarily grossly offensive in that context. But when it comes to the marketing materials for the films themselves, like these latest images, it seems somewhat bizarre to me, and I think it's interesting to speculate on what exactly the reasons are behind these choices. The first, and I think most obvious talking point, is in regards to sensitivity around firearms. Much like how Eon Productions apparently didn't care for guns in Bond games, I guess there might be a thinking that, well, a bunch of these films are rated PG, so it's not seen as being age appropriate to have key art for a PG rated film that has a gun in it. But then, at least as of my making this video, if I click through to the actual page for Dr. No on Amazon Amazon Prime, the original image of Connery with the gun in his hand is still there. I am recommended in the thumbnails below another PG-rated Sean Connery film titled The Frightened City, and that film shows the actor holding a gun in the key art, so I'm not sure that reasoning entirely holds water, that it's an age rating thing why the guns have been removed. This reasoning would also not account for the films with higher age certifications. GoldenEye, for example, is rated a 15 here in the UK, and yet the gun was still removed from Brosnan's hand to, again, completely change the context and impression of the original imagery. It looks like he's supposed to be advertising a watch, but he's got no actual watch on his wrist, leaving it looking like you just interrupted him in a moment of pensive contemplation. Sorry, did you say something? It could be algorithm and or advertising related as to why the guns were removed. Like, maybe the algorithm wouldn't promote the films to as broad an audience if guns were in the artwork. Or maybe certain advertisers wouldn't want to put their ads near the films if they had guns in the key art. But I'm not quite sure that entirely holds water, given, give a quick skim through Amazon Prime. I see handguns, shotguns, rifles in a variety of action movie thumbnails. So yes, maybe I will check out Liam Neeson's Ice Road Vengeance, because he looks pretty badass there with a gun in his hand. And if that were a particularly problematic aspect regarding the reach and monetization of the film, then surely guns would just be removed en masse from any and all movie key art on the streaming service. When it comes to marketing materials for action movies and what have you, the sight of a gun does tell you something about the film that you were about to watch, and there is a reason, I think, why for a heck of a lot of action movie posters there is some kind of gun or weaponry present, and you could even say that the Bond film posters have been incredibly influential in this regard. The sight of a gun on a movie poster is often a shorthand for action. Like, if I happened upon a thumbnail for Arnold Schwarzenegger's End of Days and he wasn't holding a gun, I could well assume that this was some kind of Exorcist-like horror film, potentially a religious film or something along those lines, but the presence of a gun there tells me, okay, there's gonna be some action component to this film. I guess the Bond series is so well known that for the purposes of their Amazon Prime key art, it was felt that guns weren't needed to sell the films. Everybody knows what to expect from a Bond film, so the thumbnails didn't need the extra component of a promise of action that the sight of a gun on a movie poster produces. MI6HQ put out an article on the subject and kind of posited that the reason guns were removed from some of this imagery was really just to give the series a unified look for the streaming service, and in all honesty, I'm inclined to think that's the real reasoning for these creative choices. Some of the stills and poses they've used for the films never actually featured guns in them anyway, so if it was a choice between digitally adding guns to some of the images or removing them from some, I guess the decision was made to do the latter so that every single image is just the Bond actor. I guess the thinking is that it just looks kind of neater that way. I still think they would have been better off just using stills from the relevant films where Bond isn't holding a gun if it was that much of an issue. My main complaint about the key art isn't that Bond isn't holding a gun in every single image, it's more just that in the cases where they've removed the guns, the images just look really bad. As I've mentioned, the instant impression from some of these images are completely changed, and as this is official artwork for these films, I don't think it's especially cool to be tinkering with them in such a way that completely changes their impact. I also don't think this means that Amazon are about to go in and start digitally removing guns from the body of the Bond films themselves, essentially what Steven Spielberg did to E.T. a while back, but with Bond it would obviously be on a much bigger scale. Obviously that would be ridiculous and would satisfy precisely no one. Like, Spielberg himself even rolled back on the whole gun removal thing from E.T. and they've been reinstated in that film for later re-releases, so I don't think anyone is about to seriously propose doing that for James Bond. If they edited around every single instance of a firearm in a movie like Tomorrow Never Dies, I think the movie would be whittled down to about 8.5 minutes. So weirdly enough, since I started making this video, it looks like Amazon have already reverted back to older imagery for the Bond thumbnails on Prime, non-featuring guns noticeably, but I guess that the backlash to the new artwork maybe had some impact after all. But I did want to wrap this video up by touching on something that I am perhaps slightly worried about succumbing to gun sensitivity pressures and regulations in the future, and that is the 007 logo itself. Now, as of my making this video, the logo is intact on these Amazon key art images. The gun silhouette is there on all of them, it hasn't gone anywhere, and this is another reason why I'm inclined to agree with the MI6HQ idea that the guns were removed from the actors' hands for a neater look, because if it really was because of gun sensitivities or what have you, they wouldn't have slapped the full 007 logo on all of these things. But as I mentioned earlier, occasionally the silhouette is dropped when it comes to tie-in products, and there have been times when I wonder if someone somewhere would take the opinion that, okay, well, we need a logo for this series that is absolutely universal, that we can use anywhere, that is bulletproof, for lack of a better term, and as a result, would they just figure like, okay, well, we're redesigning the thing anyway, so just drop the gun component because we can't use it on, you know, XYZ products, and I think that would be a terrible thing to happen. I think the full 007 logo is truly one of the most iconic brand logos for a reason, and it seemingly hasn't failed in its 60 plus years of existence, so to start redesigning it in such a radical way would not sit well with me. I'm just musing on this point, of course, and I'm trying not to be too sensationalist about this, because I don't want to, like, overblow this. Like I say, I do not think that guns are going to be removed from the films digitally. I honestly can't see that happening. Look, action movies and action series are still being made, a lot of them by Amazon, and hero characters still use guns, so I don't think anyone is going to seriously suggest a bulletless Bond. It just wouldn't make sense, and it would go against, more importantly, it would go against what general audiences expect from the Bond series. You watch now that I've said that, the next film will have the Q branch scene. Good evening, 007. Here is your latest gadget. It is a non-lethal stunner disguised as a banana. Or I suppose a sandwich would probably be more on brand for Q.
Don't touch that! It's my lunch.
Let me know your own thoughts on this subject in the comments section below, and also below you can click the subscribe button to stay up to date on future video uploads, as well as the Mrs. Bell notification button. There are links to my various social medias, so follow me on a variety of platforms if you care to do so. And with all that being said, until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.